This story is about small cats
Like a tiger, huh?
that look like big cats,
It's a real leopard.
and the people that made that possible. But before we get there, let's back up a bit. We went to an event at the Westminster Dog Show, and this year, cats were invited. So we went to film them, and we weren't the only ones. In the middle of a crowd, there was a man holding his pet cat called a Bengal. That's Anthony Hutcherson, and his whole life, he's had one dream.
So I always wanted a pet leopard or pet ocelot.
Wanting a pet ocelot might sound odd, but until recently, owning an exotic cat was not unheard of. People had pet leopards and pet cheetahs. And here's Salvador Dali with his pet ocelot named Babu. But exotic cats weren't just for celebrities. This family in Denver had a pet leopard. They named him Pasha. Growing up, Anthony found books about owning a pet ocelot, and he was fascinated.
Fortunately, the library was a little outdated, so there were still books from the 50s and 60s in my public school that said things about having a pet ocelot and made it seem normal, and I thought that could be me too.
But in the 1970s, authorities began restricting ownership and seizing exotic pets. So instead of owning an ocelot, Anthony's dream became breeding a pet cat that looked just like one. He began after seeing a magazine at a grocery store.
At the checkout, like, oh, alien spotted and woman creates domestic cat looks like leopard. And so I remembered it and followed up and found her and called her.
The woman on the phone was Jean Mill, the first American Bengal breeder.
At one point I remember saying to her, "No, I can't afford these cats, but I really want one. This is my dream. I really want to do it." And I described to her in specific detail what I wanted, and she said, "That cat doesn't exist. I want that too."
Jean told Anthony about Asian leopard cats, a wild species native to Asia that was bred with a domestic cat in order to create a first-generation hybrid called an F1, which is 50% wild, 50% domestic. Jean owned an F1, which she received from Dr. Willard Centerwall, a scientist at Loma Linda University. Dr. Centerwall was breeding hybrid cats in order to study their leukemia heredity factors, which could help in understanding and combating leukemia in human beings. But he only needed their genetic samples, and once he bred the cats, they needed homes. So that's how Jean Mill received an F1 kitten in 1980. By breeding her F1 with a domestic cat, Jean created second-generation hybrids, but the males were sterile, so Jean could only continue breeding through the female offspring.
And when they're 4 generations away from the Asian leopard cat, fertility is much more regular. And in terms of being able to be shown and be considered a domestic cat, they have to be 4 generations away from the Asian leopard cat. Sorry, that's my cats running through the room.
By reaching the 4th generation, Jean had developed a new breed, the Bengal, which was officially recognized by the International Cat Association in 1986. After his phone call with Jean, Anthony decided to start breeding on his own, so he bought an F1 Bengal and began attending cat shows.
This cat is awesome. For the future of the Bengals, I'd like to see them move more in a direction toward looking wild, being instantly identified as ooh, but I want them to be a sweet, turn them over on their side, or pull on their tail, or kiss them if you have to.
Over the years, Anthony's goal hasn't changed. He's continued to pursue it by carefully selecting cats for his breeding program.
When I make that decision to breed them, I have an idea of what I think the kittens will look like. And when they're born, I try to pick the one that looks the most like what I wanted it to look like. It's like any good chef will probably tell you. It's not adding a bunch of different stuff into a soup. It's what you choose to add and how much and when you add it.
Choosing breeding partners to develop certain traits is called selective breeding.
All cats are beautiful, but I'm not trying to make all cats. I'm trying to make a very specific cat.
A specific cat with qualities like rosettes, the naturally occurring marks on leopards that he describes as a pattern.
With that same spot that's maybe black or brown, and in the center of that spot is a color somewhere between, say, yellow or orange.
You get the picture. Anthony knows what he wants his cats to look like. But selective breeding can put animals at risk if breeders pair close relatives. So to prevent inbreeding, owners like Vicki Jeffers come to cat shows, where they can exchange cats in order to develop new traits, like the shaggy coat we saw on this long-haired Bengal.
If I bred her to Jefferson, I might get the beautiful tail and the nice ears, and the kittens might get this wonderful pattern. So what you do is you look for traits in cats that yours don't have, and you look at the pedigrees to be sure that you're not inbreeding too much.
To avoid inbreeding, breeders need a large gene pool, which means breeding large numbers of cats.
People are convinced that there are too many cats in the world, and there are an awful lot of cats in rescue, and they say, well, here you are breeding superfluous cats when there are cats that are wanting for a home. And I mean, they have a point. They have an important point, but if you look at these cats, they justify the breeding because they're just wonderful, wonderful animals. So.
Animals like Anthony's cat, Ovation.
Her name is Ovation. She's the greatest cat in the world.
And while the development of Bengals has taken decades, other breeds are just getting started. This is a Savannah, which were developed by breeding domestic cats with a serval, a wild carnivore native to African savannas. Unlike the Bengals, we found just a few cats at this booth, and that's because the Savannah is a newer breed. The first F1 Savannah was born in 1986, so there are fewer late-generation Savannahs compared to Bengals. A cat like this can cost over $1,000, but earlier generations of Savannahs are even more expensive. An F1 Savannah can cost upwards of $20,000, and owning one isn't only expensive, it can be illegal depending on local laws. In New York State, it's legal to own a hybrid, as long as it's 6th generation or later. But any generation of Savannah is illegal in New York City. So even though these cats had a special exemption, the cats we saw at this show, they're technically illegal. And that's a major reason why breeders come to the show. By showing their cats, breeders hope to demonstrate that hybrid species are just as safe as any other cat. But what if you aren't into leopards? What if what you really want is a tiny tiger? This is Tony, one of the Toygers we met. That's Toyger for toy and tiger. This newer breed was created by Judy Sugden. And before you make any assumptions, no, she did not breed a tiger with a house cat. As feline geneticist Stephen O'Brien explained to me, that wouldn't work.
As the time has elapsed, the further apart species might be to another species, the less likely they'll produce fertile offspring at all. The reason is evolution is a gradual process.
If you look at the cat family tree, you can see that domestic cats and Asian leopard cats separated from a common ancestor about 6 million years ago, which is about half the time that has passed since they separated from gray cats, like lions and tigers.
Not exactly half, but it's on that order. So there's been twice as much time for gene differences that inhibit compatibility, which means that you're twice as likely to have generated reproductive isolation, which is just not going to work, Charlie. It's just not going to work. So
It's not going to work means you can't breed with tigers. So Judy Sugden created Toygers by selectively breeding domestic cats.
And so then you breed that kitten to another kitten that might be slightly...
As a result, there's nothing wild about these guys.
We just want to go to make it reminiscent of a big cat. And so on a tiger, the chin is big and kind of sticks out.
Well, they're
straight.
absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you very much.
And while breeding a tiny tiger might seem ambitious, Judy had help along the way.
I started breeding in the mid-'80s. My mother developed the Bengal, and that was to look like a little leopard. So I said, as we were watching that thing progress, well, maybe we need a little tiger.
Judy's mother is Jean Mill, the first American Bengal breeder and Anthony Hutcherson's mentor. It turns out the world of cat breeders is pretty small. Like Anthony, Judy has spent her entire life developing a new breed to resemble its wild counterpart.
His name is Tony.
And also like Anthony, she's still pursuing that goal.
Max, Anthony.
Because although you might think these cats already look like tiny tigers and little leopards, they see something we don't, something to improve, something that will keep pushing them closer to that goal. The cat that they always dreamed of.
My motivation hasn't changed, and I went back to public libraries and to used bookstores, and I bought those books because they inspired me then, and in moments when I think my fellow breeders have no idea what they're doing, or I question how many litter boxes I can clean in a day, I still flip through those books and think, well, I'm almost there.